In previous videos, we've spoken about the Minhag, the customs of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, and those customs as they're done here at Bevis Marks Synagogue. Today I want to talk about a concept in halakha, in Jewish tradition, called Minhag Hamakom, which means the custom of the place. Minhag Hamakom is an important principle in a synagogue such as Bevis Marks Synagogue, which essentially requires that when worshiping here, one follows the customs, one follows the practices, the norms of this particular synagogue. So what exactly is the origin of this ruling? It's based on a biblical verse that says, Lo titgodedu, which literally means one shouldn't self-harm. Particularly in the context of mourning, where one might do so. However, the sages of the Talmud understood that the strange way in which that word was written, titgodedu, almost with additional letters in it, implied something else. And they said that it also taught the law of lo ta'aseh agudot agudot, that one should not make factions, that one should not have multiplied different ways of doing things. And so essentially the way that this was understood in the halakha is that in particular communities, one should not have, shall we say, division. One shouldn't have some people doing things one way and other people doing things another way. In pre-modern times where you tended to have, shall we say, a lack of movement, people would have been, their families, within the same places for generations, and this would have been a deeply held principle. And so if somebody would have come to your town, they would have, shall we say, simply adopted the norms of that particular place. However, with the increased amount of movement and breakdown in communities over the past century as a result of persecution and immigration and so forth, you essentially have the reality in most synagogues, which is do what you do. And so you'll have some people at some point standing, some people sitting, people doing things in different ways. And perhaps one couldn't say that there is a minhag hamakom, a specific way of doing things, except perhaps in a narrow sense. And so in some synagogues, the way that the service is conducted, even which specific liturgy is used, just depends on who gets up to the teba, who goes up to the shulchan, who goes to lead the prayers, and they lead in whichever style they know, whatever they're familiar with. That, however, is not the case when it comes to Bevis Marks Synagogue. As the oldest synagogue in the country, and as a synagogue which has had continuity throughout the centuries, our community holds very dear the principle of Minhag Hamakom. And so when people come to pray with us, there is an expectation in halakha, in Jewish tradition, that they will follow the norms of this synagogue, even if it's different from their own particular observance. And so what does that mean in practice? Well, the halakha distinguishes between those things which are public and those things which are private. And so, for example, anything which is said out loud or anything that has to do with, shall we say, standing, sitting, things that would be apparent to everybody else in the synagogue, one has to follow the norms of the place, what we do here at Bevis Marks. However, if somebody is saying something quietly to themselves, then there's less of a requirement to do so. One can, shall we say, quietly recite the prayers according to the way that they would do so. And so there is, shall we say, that balance between preserving one's personal practice, but not doing so in a way that, shall we say, stands out and disrupts the standard of everybody else around them. Now, in practice, the way that this is carried out has a degree of nuance. And I'll explain as follows. In some synagogues where they hold tight onto Minhag Hamakom, they take a principle that says anything that happens within the walls of the synagogue have to be in accordance with the traditions of that community. And so, for example, in New York's Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, in She'erit Yisrael, they take it very seriously. It doesn't make a difference where someone has come from, what the context is of them using the synagogue. If you are in She'erit Yisrael, there is an expectation that you will follow the practices of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews. It's a little different than how we do it here at Bevis Marks. At Bevis Marks, what we say is anything which is done in the context of the kahal, of the congregation, the worshiping congregation in the synagogue, then one must follow the practices of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews. However, if a person or a group of people have come and, let's say, rented out the synagogue for a bar mitzvah or for a wedding, then we're more lenient. Then we say, yes, you're in the building, but you're in a sense doing your own separate thing. And as long as it's not something in which the rest of the community is involved with, then if a community comes here and they want to carry out the prayers according to a different minhag, that would be something which is acceptable, except for some shall we say, exceptions where we like things to be done a particular way. But generally speaking, we make that distinction between whether it's the Spanish and Portuguese community worshiping within the synagogue, in which case we're very strict that it follows the Spanish and Portuguese rite. However, if it's another group of people coming in worshiping in the synagogue when our community is not present, we're a bit more, shall we say, lax or lenient within that ruling and permit people to follow whatever the prayer style is of the group of Jews that come to worship here, as long as it's in accordance with a set, or shall we say, a recognized tradition. And so that's the way that our community balances the Minhag Hamakom with also making sure that being in a historic synagogue in which we want more people to come and to enjoy and to celebrate family celebrations, where there can be this balance between maintaining the minhagim of our community. However, also making that this is a place which will be accessible for other groups that want to come in and to use such a beautiful synagogue as well. And so in future videos, when we talk about different minhagim, different customs, at times I'll talk about the way that this is balanced when other groups come in. But generally speaking, I'll be focusing on our minhag, the minhag of the Western Sephardim, the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, particularly that of Bevis Marks Synagogue, but looking broadly at other communities too, to understand all of the special minhagim, the special traditions of our community. And so I look forward to seeing you next time when we cover a new topic. Thank you.